Okay, so hello, good morning. Today is the second episode of the podcast that we are now launching. We're doing a roadshow. The first episode was going to be about the subject, about the patriarchy. However, because of some of the events that happened in the last few weeks, we prioritized the incident around the Spanish law of female violence, about gender violence that is being abused, and the men that were being arrested, including myself, under that law and the injustices. However, we will go back today to the original subject of why we created and launched HumanNation, why, the details of that, you can read about it in the publication with the collaboration that we did in a seminar that was in 2021 called University 2.0, where we discussed the why we're doing this, why we need a regenerative culture to transition away from this extractive capitalism and so on. So very briefly, I will just give you an overview. So I also want to bring to your attention that what we have is a broadcast on Telegram, a channel that you can join, and we will be publishing all the news around the event and also some very inspirational information. For example, every day or whenever we can, we will publish poetry, for example, by Half-Fetch URC, which is very inspirational and will make us very happy and joyful and energetic in the morning, especially. In terms of being creative and in terms of aligning our head, our heart, our mind, our hand, and our will. So let's go back to the basics. The patriarchy system, or the government and the political organizations that have been, let's say, launched, they go back to the Assyrian and the Hammurabi laws around 5,000 years ago. 4,000 years back, they were consolidated and they became enshrined in law, where basically women were subjugated and was under the authority of powerful men in hierarchical organizations, where they were used as chattel, as property, in order for these men to expand their empires and their adventures in terms of capital and assets, especially starting with land grabbing, with violence, and with colonial, let's say, imperial ambition to extend their power through acquisition of land, and also using these women as breeding industry to create children who could then pass on their patrimony, to be able to, let's say, through blood, pass organization and grow. However, later on, they learned to also capture men because they realized that by oppressing the men, by not feeding them, and then giving them food and shelter and security under the guise of the enemy, the divide and rule, that they could then enslave these men to become, let's say, resources, human resources that could be used to also continue to extend and create armies, where that was the, let's say, beginning of military empire. So by, over the many years, coming to about 300 years ago, with the industrial system that became industrialized, technology was introduced, and it was, let's say, put on steroids, and what grew to become a mercantilist society based on transactional kind of relationship, but also then capitalist organizations which was finally boosted by the City of London, the Freemasons, and creating the global financial system, which was then channeling all those funds to let's say, institutional funds, principally BlackRock, Vanguard, and Blackstone, that are the major institutional funds that channel some 95% of what is worth $90 trillion annually of wealth that's extracted, the value that's extracted from society, that is then put into these tax havens that were created to avoid any traceability. Of course, the Swiss banks, all other skill. The dark economy was created. The dark economy principally is made up of arms trade, of human trafficking, drug trade, principally opiates and cocaine and the rest, prostitution, and also the trade of commodities that cannot be traced. This is all linked to corporations that are organized to efficiently and effectively extract value, pass those to the holding company, and in that way it reaches the hands of 10,000, 20,000 people, who, or let's say the ones that control and benefit from that. However, the power is concentrated in the hands of some 0.0001% of people, which is 4 or 5 major establishment families, but that is extended to, of course, the English Empire, the American Empire, the Canadian, principally the northern, extractive, violent Anglo-Saxon has the power also in collaboration with China, the Chinese Communist Party, the Russians, the players, Brazil, the African corrupt government, and Iran, Saudi Arabia, all of these major economies principally based on raw materials. So in this way, the South, the global South, has been used on one hand as a source of resources, principally raw material, of course, metal, also agricultural land for through land grabbing to create food commodities in the global food system that run on a scarcity speculative way to control those markets. So with the prices, derivative markets that are used to manipulate futures, for example, to make sure that future prices continue to rise, creating bubbles, the bubble economy that continues to burst, because the people that control the economy, they ride on the highway in the bubble where there's a bull market, and then when the market crashes, they're selling off, and everybody else tailing them, everybody gets stuck behind them, they go crashing and they lose their money. Again, they buy cheap, and then they get it. So this is basically the financial game. However, most importantly, going back to where patriarchy really took ground, is when the Abrahamic religion, principally because of Abraham and the Jews at the time, who fraction off, there were lots of tribes in the Jewish communities, but however, one particular tribe, I don't remember the name now, did take hold and created their own laws, Abrahamic laws, where, as it can be read in Genesis, there were 3 or 4 principal codifications. Firstly, Abraham was the ruler and the king, and sanctioned by God, so that seed, which is blessed by God, can be passed on to his children. The wife was the matrix who, the lower class, let's say second class citizens, that was then used as the wife with a veil to basically point out that this is a property. So the first day, the concubines were the women that were connected to the chapel, that were used as sexual objects and also to continue breeding. And then, of course, the prostitutes and the workers that were in brothels, that were fed and given shelter. They were used and abused at will. And also the virgins that were traded as, let's say, mercantile, as a way of for powerful men to exchange and, let's say, sell wives to each other. Young 9-year-old, 10-year-old girls that would be then become wives. Basically, from there on, the men were oppressed before slavery was introduced. However, the most important and relevant law was that women wouldn't have access to God without the man. So the angels that were at the time, and the divas, and all the female domestics that were always existing in egalitarian society as it's like the most powerful because they represented Mother Nature, all the feminine laws and the energy and the serpents were oppressed and they were, let's say, demoted to lower level gods. In fact, some of them were alienated, and this created a male dominated hierarchy of society. The third most important element is that the women were basically reduced to reproductive organs and reproductive machines. Therefore, in Genesis, you will read that it says that the woman comes from the rib of Adam, the rib of the man, and also that nature is there to be exploited. So anybody that finds anything, like find its people, basically, they can give it a name, and that becomes theirs. So the concept of property was introduced, so that nature could be a resource, a reduction kind of imperialist mentality that in that way nature could be extracted and exploited. So everything was, let's say, permitted. Very, very relevant in this mechanism and methodology that the sexual and intimate relationships were oppressed because on one hand men were circumcised, which was part of the pre-Adamic cutoff to demonstrate the power of the organization over the men, and therefore they would become members of the club, and women were sometimes circumcised as well, so that they don't have pleasure. But also, very importantly, they were not allowed to express sexual delight or desire or any kind of exploration of sexual exploit, especially, monogamy was introduced, so polygamy is a natural way of, let's say, intimate relationships between private egalitarian societies was repressed, and in fact, the sexual reproduction organs were hidden so that you're not allowed to expose yourself. And all these intimate, personal, and emotional elements of human relationships were, let's say, stereotyped and tagged as evil and bad, where the snake will enter and, inside. And the man to eat the apple. The apple means that you have basically assumed the role of God, because of course you become divine by connecting with the human energy, and they didn't want that. So in that way, they would basically oppress people so that they would feel guilty and shame, and then they would be, of course, punished for this kind of expression. Now, moving forward, all this was used to create a capitalist extractive society. And today, as it was very representative, for example, in the Anglo-Saxon Victorian culture, in many other Catholic and Muslim and Jewish culture, the Jews, in fact, the man would make holy, the sheep would seen it for the woman, as a way of just inserting her and inseminating her as a machine that would be used. But the machine, the Catholics, of course, we know about, and the Muslims wear a veil, and they're just basically, let's say, shacked to reach. So now moving forward, what we have, which is very inspiring and very hopeful, let's say, development is when we have several waves of feminist movement and feminine emancipation, and of course, following that, the male emancipation, the abolishment of slavery. But in the first wave of female emancipation began with the suffragettes, who were women who organized themselves in decentralized, in America, United States, to basically request that they have a say in politics, that they have a say in government, that they have a say in decision and the voting rights. Then we had, of course, the black woman who moved from the back of the bus because of the segregation. The blacks were put away, put in the back, the second class citizens. This woman rose, that got up and sat in the front of the bus, was, let's say, the beginning and also part of the emancipation of blacks, in terms of stating their right, the human right, to be equal. Following that, we had several quite interesting developments in the industrialization period, especially post-war, starting the First World War, where women were then introduced into the industrial organizations. They were key players in administration, in nursing, and in care, education, and so on. So all that came integrated. How in this way, women were integrated into the corporate structure so that they were, again, resources that were under the governance of men, but that very much changed in the 60s with the third wave of the female movement, the feminist movement, where women went out on the street, the pill was introduced, they could express themselves sexually, they were taking drugs, they were listening to music, they were dancing freely, they were, let's say, the serpent was really awakened at that point. Now the fourth wave was when girl power started, in the 80s, and Madonna, Blondie, and then all the other girls that went out there with Spice girl power. But that kind of led to a kind of reaction from men. They said, okay, you want to have power, we'll give you power. We, created the glass ceiling, we give you roles and positions of power. But that's limited. But also the girl power thing was that it was to some extent, let's say, a bit corrupted, because that girl power became a kind of feminist, feminazi kind of movement, where those who are abusing that power also got to be carried away in mind. And that's kind of been adjusted over time. I think the most relevant now movement that we're seeing in the feminist emancipation and development is the fifth wave, which is the started in Iran, in contrast and against the Islamic Republic, which is an anarchic and also archaic Islamic organization based on law, Sharia law, the oppression of women, of course, Amini, who was smashed her head on the pavement, her skull opened up, the blood spilled out because she was not wearing her veil, the Kurdish girl. Then all the other girls that went out, the Apadana girls that were dancing in the podcast, that then were disappeared. They were taken away because they were found on Instagram. We knew where they lived. So the Apadana complex girls in the apartment block. Then several other girls and boys that were all together in the street. Some 20,000 youth disappear. Young girls, 10, 11, 12-year-old were gassed in their schools with anti-demonstration illegal gases that would make them vomit. Men were hit with clubs. They were tortured. Shireen, who sang the Baraya song, he wasn't, he didn't disappear, but he was severely tortured and destroyed. His soul was destroyed. Many men were taken away, or they managed to escape the country as well. So here we continue with the struggle. However, I think that right now the most relevant aspect of war, warriors in life are working in the struggle to destroy the patriarchy. And I think where we should focus and where we are focused as a community is in the destruction of the City of London Corporation, because the City of London Corporation is the hydra that sits on top of global finance that, let's say, controls all this top down, then based on Anglo-Saxon Freemasonry, vile black magic, voodoo, and negative, very obscure psychology that is used to extract finance. Therefore, the abolishment of the City of London, which is a tax haven, is on autocratic government of the mayor of the City of London, Lord, the UK government that basically dictates how the empire should be run. The Queen and the King don't have rights in this territory, therefore they need permissions from the mayor and the governing body, which is the Corporation of London, to access the 1 mile per mile city. And of course, that's connected to the legal system, the corporate, the insurance, and all that. So that's where we'll be hitting hard. How will we hit it? We are using the third way universal law of the cosmos, which is that we do not enter into ego wars and ego clashes. We use the third way that is well described in the philosophy of, for example, Aikido, the art of peace, not the art of war of Chan Tzu, which is a military tactic of divide and rule and destruction, but the art of peace is about channeling the negative energy and dissipating it, and focusing our energy and our heart and our will and our work on positive, creative, the creative force, based on the feminine principles, but also the land, especially Mother Tierra, Pachamama, Mother Nature, recovery of soil, recovery of the ocean, air, the water, quality, this abolishment of chemicals, destruction of chemicals, dioxin, and all that from our ecosystem, recovery of ecosystems, recovery of the biodiversity, and the development of thriving natural ecosystems and communities. We will be doing that in a decentralized form with the creation of living labs. That will be the topic for the second, the next third. We'll be talking about how we create living labs, action-based community, conscious community cluster all across Europe and Italy, globally. But we will be starting in Cordoba. I'll be going back again next week. Do collective land ownership. We are buying some land, and also that will be the headquarters of our movement in terms of creating hyper-local, place-sourced communities that will be co-working, co-creating, co-designing, co-living, involving everything from cultivation to proximity food systems to ecotourism to textile, natural fiber development to health and well-being. Things we're taking a whole ecosystem of incubation and acceleration, mainly focused on peacefully, which is the focus in the center of the talk, where we will guide and help and handhold, and people who want to make the transition to go into creative modes. The Triple U, for example, that was developed by MIT, where we'll be doing the unlearning, the listening, the lesson come, the lesson go, the presencing, crystallizing, and then the creation of prototypes that will be tested and piloted to operational demonstrations, and those demonstrations will be taken to market, create a new eco-social economy. Economies, I would say, because they're local economies, based on anarchic, decentralized voluntary association, eco-social market transaction exchange respaldado, that's supported by decentralized systems based on cryptography, digital platforms connected to user data spaces like, and from there on, we'll be connecting that to be able to manage the governance, the impact KPIs, and the quality assurance of the overall ecosystem, the overall environment, and then all the way through to the dashboard, being able to measure how it's going so that the management, the governance board can make decisions, especially around financial, the funds that need to go into these projects, and they can make decisions on whether we're going the right way, steering committee and such. So I'll leave it there, and I'm very happy to see you again. We'll see you in a few days, and I wish you the best and a wonderful day. It's so wonderful.